Welcome to the Ardan Labs Podcast. Our special guest today is Peter Swimm. Peter, how's it going, man?
It's going pretty good. How are you?
We're good. I'm in Miami. I'm not allowed to complain when it's almost November and I'm in Miami.
I'm just outside beautiful, sunny Seattle, Washington.
No, I love Seattle. I keep telling my wife we have to go there. I haven't been there in so long, and I've got great friends over there. So I'm kind of bummed out, man. Peter, give everybody, don't go too far into any timeline because this podcast is about putting you into the time machine, and we're going to sort of discuss how you got here. But give everybody the 2-minute spiel on what you're doing today.
Sure. I am the founder of a consultancy called Toilville. And Toilville is kind of around all things conversational AI, conversational UX. So includes things like chatbots and LLMs and workplace automation. And I've been in the industry for 30 years. And I try to help small businesses and business owners do workplace automation that doesn't rob them of their creative excellence and their competitive advantages.
Nice. So what, I'm kind of curious, you're doing all so you're basically trying to leverage AI reasoning models to figure out what steps need to sort of get done. And then you've got like a workflow engine that's sort of executing those steps in a general.
You know, when you think of an intelligent organization, right, there's all processes and a lot of small businesses have what they have. So to even out their playing field, they can insert these processes in places where it makes sense to, accelerate their things that they do. So they could be as nimble as the big guys.
Are you using any particular software platforms to do that? Or is this things that you built?
No, it's completely agnostic. My tools, actually, we use my tools to build whatever the client's tools are, because it's all just filing systems when you come down to it. And so like a person says, oh, I want to use Copilot, or I want to use ChatGPT, or I want to use Excel, or I want to use numbers. It's just like, it's XML, it's JSON. So the wonderful thing about this age of vibe coding and stuff is that if you create really strong typed playbooks, you can type in any language, meaning computer or human spoken or modality or whatever. So we try to get people thinking in that mindset where, I'm not a Microsoft house, I'm not a Google house. You are your company's expertise house. And the tools you use are as relevant to the work you do as a hammer is to a carpenter.
Are you running your own sort of local models, or are you using models
in-house? We do run our own models. I think what makes it hard is these models are very data hungry, right? And so to get it to work, you have to either give it your life story, or you have to give it the framework and the modality for it to do its vibe coding against. Otherwise, hallucinations happen. And I think hallucinations are a symptom of uncertainty and lack of process, both in ChatGPT level and Copilot level, but also down at the org level, where a lot of companies don't realize that 4 or 5 crucial people are the glue to hold their company together, and it's in their head. And so when you go to automate that without those people, then you find that the system doesn't have enough info, so it's just going to make stuff up.
So you've said vibe coding twice now. So are you using Claude Code, Cursor, Lovable?
Yeah.
What are you using?
Yes.
All three?
We use everything, and we benchmark it constantly. And every week the levels go up and down between, it's like a many horse race. And I think the takeaway that I have from the last 6 months is it depends on what you're building, and depends on, what tooling you want to build in. But they all require very, very strong governance requirements around them that the platforms don't have natively. So you have to you can't just vibe code in a vacuum. You have to vibe code in a white room. And then once that white room is safe, and then you bring it into your processes.
So the things, so I have a consultancy too, right? We're getting these AI projects and been working on this stuff for a good 18 months. And it's what's finally happening to us is we're doing work for clients, and we don't want to necessarily do them on cloud-based. So I use SourceGraph AMP, let's say, for my AI coding tool, right? I really love AMP. We try to do as much as we can on local models because at some point you're technically leaking uh, client IP at some level, right? The moment you talk to that model up in the cloud and it's generating code, you're telling that company what you're doing. And yeah, they have the privacy policy and you're paying for it. So they're not supposed to be using that data to train anything. But do you know that 100%, right? And so this is starting to come up over and over and over again. Am I even allowed to use, like, Lovable, right? That's completely going to be cloud based, right? Even if you build your own MCP tools. So at some point, right, you're feeding all of these companies maybe proprietary things you're doing, proprietary code, and it's starting to become a real sort of situation. Are you running into any of that? What are your thoughts around using these tools for this stuff?
Yeah, we keep a strong eye on those privacy policies. And what many people might not know is on October 8th, Anthropic said all consumer usage, they own the output. So,
Right.
so anyone who's using Claude Code or Claude whatever in the consumer, Claude Max or whatever, you don't have a legal right to your stuff anymore. So that might be a shocker whenever this goes out. Hopefully that information's gotten out. But until if what we had to do was we had a client that was ongoing and we just like rewound the commits until October 8th and reran them in a new API. And
Wow.
so because the EULA says you own the prompts, but not the output, which is like weird.
That's crazy.
It's
I,
weird
I
and
hadn't
extra.
heard that. I didn't hear
Yeah.
that. I don't think that's flowing around the internet right now.
No. Have your lawyers read the EULAs because basically you have to use direct API access with Anthropic now. Otherwise, and you have to opt out of the training thing now, which was still ill before, but now it's like they're just one step away from explicitly opt out. Always for everything. That's the other thing I teach my clients is just like don't go copying company secrets into a prompt on a website. And how do you label things and how do you plan things? And certain platforms have a lot of governance, and some platforms run by Sam Altman have like fly by your seat governance. And so that is like a huge risk, I think, especially for small companies, especially like it's weird when you come up with an idea for a product and then the big guy announces the product a month later and you've been using their AI and you feel paranoid and sick to your stomach. And the way you combat that is you have like a trust log and governance, and you have commits and prior art that shows you when you did the art, because it's like if no one owns the ideas and no one owns the execution, then why are we paying customers to you? Like why are we what exactly the value you're getting. And that's why we're exploring local models, because I think a lot of the inference task and figuring things out tasks deserve to live as close to the mainframe as possible. It shouldn't go on the cloud.
Yeah. But then I imagine, since they're saying they own the output, which I tell this to Florin and some other people,
Yeah, good luck in court.
I
Yeah.
just had somebody, a client, I think it was Claude Code. There was a conference coming up. They wanted to do a demo. They literally had a 5,000 line commit because they vibe coded on Claude for like a half an hour. And my guess, though, then is that they are giving you a license to use their code. Like, what does the license for using that code look like?
I think it's like as long as you pay the subscription, so you're a landlord, it's kind of like they think it's like a Photoshop model, but like Photoshop doesn't own the images you make, like so it's very strange, and it definitely like made me consider more commercial things more strongly. And it's great because you think these things change week by week, right? And so when like I first used a product like Codex, ChatGPT's Codex, I didn't like it at all, and now I find it very capable in a junior developer kind of way. I can give it the context prompts of like what is our house style rules and stuff, and it kind of suggests things that I don't have to correct a lot. And I think that is the measure of like vibe coding, where it's like it's not enough to have a hello world, right? It's not enough to like ship a product that functionally works. And like you said, 5,000 lines of code. Hackathon at Toilville this week called Pro Vibe Summer, where we just vibe coded only for a week, and it made 3,000 Python programs. And those 3,000 Python programs were 300 operations done 10 times over. And those 300 operations are really just functions of 10 products.
So
And
what's crazy to me is when I heard about this 5,000 line commit, I basically went to the CTO and I said, I said, I'm not comfortable with this, right? Because, well, Bill, it's only we did it quick for a demo for a conference. And the CTO and I are always on the same page. And but right, somebody's going to see it at the conference. They're going to think it's a full product. They're going to want it. And you're going to have a hard time saying no because there's revenue there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now you don't really know if you can maintain, manage, and debug these 5,000 lines of code and really, right? And so and now you're telling me, and by the way, now you don't own that code because we use Claude to do it. So good luck with that. Oh my God.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's cool.
Oh my God.
So I exported all my Claude prompts for the week, and then I had it analyzed by product X, like a llama, and I had it pull out all my prompts and made a new requirements doc and generated a new code base based on that. So it took me like a day. So I lost like a day from Claude's lawyers. And I think that's really a good point. The reason I was able to lose only a day is because we have an internal governance framework that is basically like a linter for your brain. And so when we make things all the same way. We make it towards the goal of being a single unified code base. And vibe coding doesn't do that, right? Because vibe coding is just like is like a mouse in the maze for the cheese. So it's trying to solve things as quick as it can. And I think that's why people think Claude is so good, because you don't have to like, if you don't care what it spits out, you don't have to manage it. But if you care what it spits out, it's like being the worst Montessori teacher of all time, where you're just like, no, stop doing that. Escape, the whole process. And there are ways to constrain it. Claude has hooks and pre-hooks and all that. But it's very hard to get it to like have every session be the same strength of session. Like you basically like, it's like having like when you have an open thought session with your engineers before the spec is designed, every single time you use it. And if you have a spec, it should be like setting up best practice templates times 1,000, right? And so my code base, the end of that vibe week, I had 3 gigs of commits and databases, and I just let it do what it's want. And now I have a 50 meg binary, of which 40 megs of that is Postgre and 10 megs of executable in Rust. And in that database is all this is how we make a Word document. This is how we make a Python script. This is how we make a network call. And so now I can wrap everything in the world and translate it into my thing, whether it's NPM or pip or Python or C#. And that's the only way vibe coding works.
It's wild. It's wild. And being an engineer for like 35 plus years, right? Like I love the source graph AMP tool. I love it at a function level. I love it at instead of using Google search, like it's made me more productive for sure. When I'm teaching and training, I have to turn off tab completion because it's always in my way, right? But for the most part, I think when you look at it as a tool, it's been really amazing for me. I don't really do front end stuff, but I think what I saw with Lovable would be really amazing, at least to get a UI up and going. But I'd be afraid to just live in it for the UI, because the moment it's not fixing a bug, you're sort of like it's like that framework you decided to use to move fast, and the moment it boxes you in, you can't maneuver. And I imagine it's the same thing. Once the tool can't fix the bug it created, you're sort of done.
Yeah. Well, and that's like for short story, Lovable is very bad, I think, at front end design, because all LLMs really are bad at math, right? And so like when you vibe code a front end and your div is not a 3:2 ratio, like the visually pleasing aesthetic that we all know in website design, it can't figure it out. So you have to like give it a framework that works and just say, replace all the colors with this color and replace all the text with this text, because it doesn't do things bespoke by scratch. So either you make Ansible like playbooks for your entire world and then just have it fill in the blank, which is kind of like expensive for what LLMs are. And then you get to the point of like, oh, I should just build a local chatbot on my computer compute, because every computer they've sold the past 2 years is Apple Intelligence this or Copilot that, and they can run a llama. You can buy a $1,000 laptop that can do a pretty good AI inference locally.
Yeah, especially with the quantized models where they can, it all comes down to the accuracy, right? Like I don't know yet if I could use the best open source model I've run, I have an M4, dude. I got 128 gig on this thing, okay?
Yeah.
And for me, the GPT OSS model has been really interesting. It runs pretty good on this machine, and it's been fairly accurate. But I still don't think I could drive my coding tool against it. Like we're still probably 12 to 18 months out before we could run a local open source model with the level of accuracy we're getting sort of in the cloud. Like at least what we're seeing today, right? It's going to happen. And then it gets super interesting because you have to, this is the same thing with performance with software, right? It's fast. Like you're mentally, you have to say it's fast enough. At some point, you have to say this is accurate enough and be willing to sort of accept that it's still not the best because you're always 12 to 18 months behind what's in the cloud, but it's good enough, right? It's a hard thing for people to sort of accept, but I think it's going to happen.
Well, also like if you use the vibe to create the Lego blocks and then you build the Lego blocks, that's an improvement, right? Like maybe it's not the improvement you envisioned of like wishing into a microphone and getting an application on the other end. But if you could just say like combine product X and Y from a portfolio into product Z, and it could do that in a day so you can see how it looks, like doesn't have to be the thing you ship, like to your demo analogy, like seeing something works give you the idea for what the spec is, and then make those prompts of like the fixes. You don't have to live with the vibe coding output, even though you spent how much AI on it or whatever, because that's the other problem I have with these AI systems is that they're not learning systems. The only one who's learning is Anthropic on you, like we said, or Claude, ChatGPT on you. And there's no like, unless you commit things to the 32K of memory they give you of like, okay, on November 1st, I thought this, and November 20th, I think this. And they're the same semantic idea, but now we call it doodad instead of gjaw. How do you iterate on that? And I think that's the tragic flaw in vibe coding is a lot of people really struggle how to productize that. I worked with big banks and companies at Microsoft for many months of struggling of trying to get, okay, we did this amazing demo for CEO and CTO. We can't get it from the 68% vibe code quality to the 99.99 SLA required quality. And it's because the prompt is doing too much and you have to like build it entirely from scratch to avoid all the hallucinations, because the world you have today is a compromise of time and physics. And if you rebuilt it from scratch in vibe coding, maybe it'd be a much simpler prompt.
All right. So you scared the hell out of me so much with Claude Code. I had one of my guys while we were talking look it up.
Okay.
And there's a sentence, an interesting sentence that says, subject to your compliance with our terms, we assign you all of our right, title, and interest, if any, in outputs. So you own the outputs as long as you are
paying
in
customer
compliance with our terms. Now, I don't know what the terms are, but
well, the terms include being a paying customer. So like, am I a subscriber to Claude for the rest of my life? I decided to just not deal with it and throw that code away because it's like, I figured it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth my time to like worry about it. And we'll let like some big dogs make the legal.
So you think
precedent.
that the moment, so if you're paying if you're a paying customer at the time they give you the output, good. But you think the moment you're no longer a paying customer, you lose the rights to everything that they've ever outputted to you?
My lawyer was concerned, so I'm concerned.
Wow.
And I think like, the thing about IPs, like there's actionable and then there's like what's moral and right? And is this morally defensible? Probably not. But will it stop me being dragged into court by Oracle with their $1 million an hour lawyers and stuff?
Yeah,
And
I
like,
mean, right now, no, you're too small. But if suddenly you
yeah,
become a $1 billion company,
yeah,
right, it might get to a point where they're like, well, which developer did that? Well, that developer was on a personal account. You did that for the company. They should have been on an enterprise account, right? So I can see sort of where this goes, right? Okay.
yeah. So our in-house governance system, we actually fingerprint each model and API endpoint as part of like the code commit with hashes and stuff. So like if it comes down 10 years down the line, if someone says, we did an analysis and you're using commercial API, we're like, no, we're not. Here's the hash and here's the code, And I think like that's like what people, CTOs and stuff, should be thinking about doing. Like, you really need to have a provenance log and, IP generation, and keep your Git logs around, because that is going to be your defense on like the patent wars of, 10, 15 years from now, I think.
Yeah, now you're just scared. You just really like took this to the next level for me, Peter. Like
And,
when
this
people
happens with my
say,
clients too. So,
no, I know, but one of my favorite questions is always to ask somebody like, what keeps you up at night? Like you just added to that list. I just
thank
want
you.
to say thank you, Peter. You just added to that list,
Yeah,
right? Because
yeah.
if you're in compliance with our terms, is, you're right, it's vague. But I could argue I was in compliance at the time you gave me that code. What is more scary is, yeah, but that developer was using a personal account, wasn't using a company account, right? So yeah, I have to think about this more.
I mean,
So
like, luckily it's easy. Like, if you use something like Purview or something like that, that does like, trust chain, like, it's basically the same way you protect against supply chain attacks is the same way you create the trust log, right? Because you need to have like, okay, actor X committed binary Y on date C, and here's the hash to prove it. And, I have it, they have it, the client has it. And so now you have 3 points of evidence proof that shows the provenance of the thing you made. And so, like, we do like a lot of like client work, and either we use it, we generate stuff with our IP into a container that's their IP that they own, and they could do whatever they want with it, or they license it or whatever it is. And we got to figure out the support models for this as an industry too, right? Because it's like, I try to ship things that are agnostic to flavors of the month technologies, right? So, like, say Claude gets bought, by whoever, some Twitter like acquisition happens and their personality completely changes in a night, and you no longer want to be associated with them. Like, what would you do, and how would you leave? And I think that is also like the CTO nightmare of the future is, your platform being acqui-hired one day and becoming a completely different person.
all right. I want to make sure we jump into the time machine
Yes.
before we run out of time here. So
Yeah.
let's do that, and then we'll sort of get back to this. So first question is, what year did you graduate high school, and where were you on the planet?
Nine.
98, Chicago. Okay. And now clear your mind, because I want to hear the very first memory that pops into your head of you sort of handling a computer. What's the very first memory you have?
When I was in fifth or sixth grade, I found a 286 in the trash, and I dragged it home with its amber monitor, and I booted it up with the floppies it had, and it had
It turned on.
it turned, oh, it worked. It was fine. It was just like 1988, 89, and so it was trash. It was e-waste before we knew what e-waste was, and so I booted it up, and it had a chess master on it, and it had pornography, and it had
My
a
God.
spreadsheet program. So that was my first computer. My first home computer was a Windows 3.11. I remember it was a Packard Bell, and it didn't come with any system disks, so I had to buy 32 floppy disks and make a backup of the entire OS. That was like my first like big boy computer task, is inserting 32 floppies in a series from a computer as it does its backup that didn't come with the machine.
Wow. Okay, that's really cool. I wouldn't have thought it was working since it was in the trash. Like you really didn't know if it was going to work or not.
I mean, I was, we did what we could in our family growing up. So, like, I was not above dragging some cool electronics home and see what it does.
Okay, so 1998
Eight.
in Chicago, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago, or
No, the
you
city.
lived in the city?
City.
In the city, nice.
Yeah, West Rod.
Tell me a little bit about high school, dude. Like, what were the things you were interested in high school? What were you doing
So,
in high school?
my first 2 years of high school, I went to a science high school, and they asked me to leave. And I think the vibes were off. Like, I wasn't a bad kid. I was just like already on my own, marching to my own drummer. I took a couple programming classes I didn't like. They were teaching QBasic for programming. It was just, and the principal brought me and my mom in the class and says, "We'd like your son to leave. We have no cause to ask him to leave, but we would like him to leave." So I went to arts high school where I majored in creative writing. That's where I graduated.
Creative writing.
Yeah.
Were you an avid reader? Were you
I
reading?
was. I was an avid reader, and I think I picked creative writing because I needed a portfolio, and so I spent like 2 days cranking out some poetry and an essay for my portfolio.
Child number 6, she just started university now. But in high school, she would be reading like 3 books at a time.
Mm,
I couldn't comprehend it. Like she just couldn't consume the books fast enough. So she'd start one, get so far in, start the next one, go back to that one. It's like insane to me that she could do that. It was
yeah.
wild.
Well, AI is worse because I'm reading like 9 books right now at the same time. Because
What?
like I'm reading like 9 books because there's 2 or 3 books I read for pleasure, and then there's books I'm reading for work, and then there's like social economics kind of like furthering my brain. And I just like read a chapter here and there of each. I don't read them at the same time, obviously, but like, I'm working through books, and, I use Notion for my notes, and I use those notes to write. So,
Well, I guess I could understand if you're doing some fiction, I mean, nonfiction stuff, right? But like she's reading 3 fiction books at a time,
no, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
stories.
I mean, they're chapter books, so they're meant to be. They're not meant to be. You don't read them in one sitting. I think it's just like episodic TV. Like, and people's
Yeah, I guess.
different brains. It's like I'm going to catch in with the Game of Thrones guy in chapter 12. It's just an episode of a show.
I
But like,
guess I do
I
that with.
understand like how I understand like the book club idea of like, yeah, I need to read this book and experience on its own without input from any other literature. Like, and they're equally valid, I think.
No, 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 no. The fact that you just said I don't, right? I'm watching 3 or 4 different TV shows, chapter at a time, and they come out. I do that. So thinking about doing that with a book, I guess, isn't really. I don't know. I've always, from the early age, that it was you taught if you're going to read a book, you start it. How not how long if like, because if you're going to have time to read again, you go pick up that book again, right? But I don't do that with TV. You're like 10,000% right.
Mm.
At any level, I don't do that with TV. However, if I wait more than a couple of days to get back to a TV show, I have to see the recap. You don't get the recap with the book though, right?
Yeah, yeah. I guess you could ask AI to recap. Like I'm on chapter 9. Where am I at? Where am I at? And that's like the
Yeah,
middle
maybe.
ground of, it's a middle ground of making AI read for you being bad, but you can have it at least like catch you up. you know.
Were you doing any sort of computer stuff in high school? I mean,
I
it's
mean, I loved computers. I was really into electronic music. I was like, I remember geeking out on Usenet because I could find people that were like into all the weird bands I liked, and you know, I was able to like take trash computers like I had and find a way to make music with them without having a huge studio. And so I've always really been interested in technology. Like, my first real job was in 1996. Bill Gates, pre Bill Gates Foundation, gave internet computers to every library in the city of Chicago. And so they hired a bunch of teens for the summer to train the community how to use Internet Explorer. And that's kind of like my first tech job. And I kind of like understood right there was like, okay, there's technology and then there's like what people do with it. And so, talking to a senior citizen who wants to look up, what was the box score of a 1968 Red Sox game, and a woman trying to find, quilting patterns. And it really took me out of like that computers are for young people and technology is always new and different. It's like, no, people want to do what they want. And I think that's really the foundation. And even at Toyville today, I think we have that same kind of mindset of like, it's the form, not the function. And you use a computer where it suits you and you don't have to use it where it doesn't. And I think that's kind of like the thing that we kind of lose with this AI thing is because a bunch of these like tech guys who never saw humanities class in their life, and they're like, "Wow, look at this Sora! It's just like a movie. Hollywood's gonna go out of business." And I've never seen a single Sora video that even made coherent narrative cinematic sense to me. Like it's so like impossibly uncinematic that I feel like Hollywood has nothing to fear for a long time, right? And I think that comes down to like having a cultural lens of which you can evaluate this technology.
Well, my dad, who was born in 33, he's not alive anymore. He was absolutely fascinated with Google and being able to look up anything at any time because he didn't have that, right? Even when I was in high school, we had the card catalog. Somebody was saying to me something like about using AI now to write a report, and how easy it is, and or people are cheating, right? And I said to them, look, when I was a kid, I had to go to the library and get the card catalog and look it up and pray the book was in the library. When you were a kid, you didn't have to do that. You got on Google and was able to look it up. As far as I'm concerned, you were cheating. You had it easier. And now you're sitting here complaining that somebody has an AI model to sort of help them. And I'm laughing at you because you're no different than what I thought back at
Yeah.
card catalog days. It's no different. It's a progression of how do you gain access to materials, and then how do you sort of format those materials into, right? And they were like, "Whoa, yeah, I guess you're right." It's just this progression that I also saw. This thing on the internet was amazing. It went all the way back to like the 15th century, and how people were complaining about how the current generation dresses. And it just did this sort of transition almost every 100 years, about the old generation complaining about the new generation and like how they dressed or how they did something. Like, we've been doing this forever. My dad having access to the internet was mind blowing to him, that he could, just look up anything that he wanted at any given time, and it was like there. So yeah, I mean, that what you're talking about with somebody who's older now having access is really cool.
Well, and I think that also kind of like it also helps diffuse that emperor has no clothes feeling. Sometimes you get about technology of like yeah, maybe it is better to walk a mile in the snow uphill to write an essay, right? And maybe that like is and maybe that's just America's Victorian work ethic coming to bite us in the hinder, right? Where like, okay, you did the research to do an essay with real books, but your parents own a library in your house. Like what is the cultural, like, so I need some sort of like cultural, like balancing tool to give me the same opportunity to get into Harvard as you have to get into Harvard. And I have to work that much harder because I need a full ride scholarship. And so I think like when we talk about the morality of technology, we really have to like interrogate a morality for whom, and like who pays the price for that access. And I think that where AI has really become a toxic brand in all this is because the AI companies could have just like came out in the get go. Open AI could have bought Internet Archive and kept it exactly 100% how it is, and will say, we're going to make everything free with provenance and you can search it in the model. But they didn't want to make that bet. They wanted to become a landlord of prompts, and now you don't know where they get their data from and all that. And I think that is like a material issue that is like completely wholly different than is AI vibe coding or vibe essaying the same as writing, because especially like, I have a lot of writer friends who are like, they got the AI hats and whatever. And I understand it because they materially are threatened because no one has shown them a future for them in this model. And so like when you teach a kid, you sign a kid at school an essay, are you teaching him how to structure and write a grammatical essay? Are you teaching him how to make a point and argue it with good rubrics? What is the purpose of the class? And I think like if the purpose of the class is generating an essay, then using machine is wrong. But you can use it for like a supporting research paper and even like making them include the prompt output attached, and then you write your essay alongside it as like your bibliography maybe. But have them write the essay, because how else are they going to tell if the prompt is good or not if they don't know how to read an essay or write an essay?
Here at Ardan Labs, we believe in empowering companies to reach their full potential through innovative technology solutions. Trusted by small startups and Fortune 500 companies alike, we specialize in high-performance software consulting, training, staffing, development, and now AI. With over 14 years of experience, Ardan Labs has trained over 30,000 engineers and served over 1,000 companies worldwide. Whether you're mastering Go, Rust, Kubernetes, Terraform, or blockchain, we're your strategic partner for performance-grade solutions. Let's elevate your tech journey together. Reach out to Ardan Labs today.
Well, for me, it's there's two things that's really interesting, right? Like I'm trying to teach the kids that are still in school. Use the AI. It's a tool. Don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of getting in trouble with it. Don't ask it to write the thing. Ask it to give you a detailed outline. And then put that outline in your own words, because that's really valuable, right? To have that outline and give it all the research you've done. But I think what's going to happen, and I had somebody on a show, I don't know how many weeks ago, but I think what's going to happen is schooling is going to at some point move to just being oral in terms of tests. You're going to almost get away from paper tests at some point. And it's going to be, tell me what you know. Tell me about this subject, right? Maybe you still hand in the paper, but you still got to have that, tell me what this paper is about. Because other than that, right now, we can't AI your brain. So either you knew this material or you don't. And I just feel like that's going to start happening, which is going to put even more burden on teachers, which are already like massively burdened because of everything that they have to do to prevent the current set of cheating that say we go on. Or what I'm seeing now is like documents now that have to really protect themselves on what they told a student to do, how they're going to get grade. I just saw this week with number 7, who's in 8th grade. I forgot what she called the Rubik's. It's the first time I heard this term. I'm like, what's a Rubik's? Oh, she was complaining that the teacher hadn't given her this Rubik's. And I said, what is this? Oh, it lays out exactly what I need to do, how I'm going to get graded. And I'm like, every teacher has to put this document together now? Yeah. And in the back of my head, all I'm thinking is some parent lost their mind and screamed that their kid didn't do the work and got a bad grade because they didn't know what they were supposed to do. They didn't know how they were going to get graded. And all I'm thinking of, in the 70s, if I came home and complained about that, my mom would have smacked me in the head. Right? You should have listened to the teacher better. Like the burden is amazing.
And like we're making like middle school teachers and grade school teachers write their own pedagogy. And so they all have a KPI that they're judged by, but they don't have a lesson plan to employ. And so it really is setting up teachers and students for failure, don't you think? That, like, okay, I'm in 7th grade and her rubric is this, and 8th grade, her rubric was that, and nothing translates from 7th grade to 8th grade. So I am kind of like reinventing. And I feel like work is like that. When we talk about agile and sprints and things like that, and then you go to a new company and they call it something else. And, Microsoft's talking about mindfulness and whatever. And it's just like, Richard Feynman, the physicist, said, the worst thing about computers is naming, because everyone comes up with the wrong names for you, and so like, it's almost like we need like some sort of like personal governance system that just translates at my layer, that I have to deal with whatever BS my job wants me to do or my school wants me to do, and that is accessible and accountable to me. So your daughter who wants to read 8 books at a time can, and your other kids who want to read books serially can, but as long as the outcome is aligned,
Right.
And so, but that's not what they want to do in public school. They need to like industrialize public school and all that. So I had a hard time in public school. I was in the gifted program, and so I went from C's and D's, and the gifted program I was in A's and B's because they changed the modality of like the grading system to better match not a factory floor, but like whatever, touchy-feely stuff was possible in the late 80s. And I think about it, and I think, we talk about, writing an essay and walking uphill in the snow. I grew up in a time where neurodiversity was, you were special ed or not, right? You were rubber roomed or not. And there was all these kids that were just like, oh, he's lazy, or he's a bully or whatever, that nowadays are treated appropriately, at least more appropriately, and like at least have like more tailored situations. But these teachers are getting pressured more and more to having less of a windowed opportunity for each individual student. And so when we're talking about bringing AI to the classroom, it's weird that they're like attacking the most valuable part of teaching, which is the one-on-one human time, and not tackling the test generation and the rubric measurement and all that boring stuff and grading and all that stuff that teachers like, spend time off the clock doing.
I mean, I graduated, I was a bad student for whatever reason, but my teachers liked me and they always tried to find points. Like in the history, the New York Regents history exam, which a lot of it was you had to write. Like I got a 65 on that because I had two history teachers that liked me, and they just scrambled to find any points that they could, right? And this is late at like 87, right? And so you're right. In 87, in the 80s, tests had this ability for teachers to sort of subjectively identify if you knew material or not, right? Where everything today is the state exam. No, obviously you need a measuring stick at some level, right? You got to be able to measure if a kid knows this material or not. So I'm not against the tests, but there was something about that in the late 80s that give teachers some flexibility to be subjective about something. And we've definitely lost that for sure. All right, so I got to get you back in a time machine. I don't
Sure,
even
sure,
know
sure.
how we got on this tangent.
Yeah, that's fine.
So you're into creative writing. So is
Yeah.
the idea now that you're going to go to college and pursue more creative writing in English and all that?
Well, I'm still on my gap year. It's been 24 gaps, but yeah, I never made it to college.
So you graduated high school and
Took a gap. Yeah, I took a gap year and then never came back.
your parents were okay with the gap year?
You know, I didn't have a lot of like adult definition in my life at the time. So I think it was kind of up to me to be okay with it, and I was okay with it.
But you weren't allowed to just sit at home and do nothing.
No, I left home. I went out on my own. I was out of the house at 18.
Oh, at 18. So you had that job that you were talking about.
No,
was
that was just a summer. That was a summer thing, and I got
Okay.
a job at an internet startup called Texas.net, and I was doing the call center at Texas.net in San Antonio, Texas. So I left Chicago, roomied with some people I met in the AOL chat room, and I moved to San Antonio, Texas.
And your parents were like, good, go, 18. Oh, you
They
make
didn't really have a choice in Nevada. Yeah, they didn't have a.
No,
I was
I guess
making
not.
I was making okay money. I was making like $8 an hour and 1999 money. I guess that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Well, it was enough for you to afford a flat with roommates
Yeah,
and eat,
yeah.
apparently.
Well, it's funny. The roommates dipped within like a month, but they kept paying the rent. So I lived by myself for the first like adult year for like $200 a month rent.
Wow.
So yeah,
Wow.
falling upwards.
I mean, when you look back on, I always say ignorance is bliss, right? Like when you look
Yeah.
back on that time now, you say to yourself, like, if I knew now what I knew, I wouldn't have done that, right?
Well, you know, and that's what I tell my nieces and nephews and stuff. It's like, this is the time of your life to F up, right? Like, this is the time where your failures are so low, no one notices them. And this is the time to take risk. And so, like, I tell them that when they complain about their boss or they say that they're not appreciated at work or whatever, it's like, quit. Like, you don't have any kids yet. You're not married. You don't have a mortgage. Get another job. And like, that's scary, right? Especially like when you've still on your first job. But in my line of work, I meet people who are still on their first job and they're in the 40s and 50s. And I think they're worse off for it, right? Because you don't have that like promiscuous perspective of how different things are done. Because how do you make things for people unless you see different ways of things getting done, And so I think that's the most important thing you do. Like, I don't even think college is necessary anymore unless you need that degree to justify your status in the economic situation. Like,
Well, I
if you
mean,
need to prove you went to Harvard and stuff.
with the way the job market is now, having a 4-year degree is almost default now. Like if you don't have that on your resume, I have a nephew who is 10,000 times smarter than me, but never had the 4-year degree on the resume and nobody wanted to talk to him. So we finally made the decision to start doing college because if you want to get, and he's smart enough to do aerospace stuff, which is what he wants to do, right? It's really sad today that, or at least we're back in a place where either it's college or trade. And if you don't have one or the other, you are going to fall way behind and really not have any opportunities at all, unless you're able to become an entrepreneur and figure that out. That's option number 3, right? But
Yeah. And I acknowledge, like, I'm a white guy. And so I pass through a lot of barriers with my lack of bona fides that people don't, and like a lot of my biggest career kudos is through nepotism. Because I knew a guy who introduced me to the recruiter, or I did some back channels, or I met someone at an event and whatever. And so, like, yeah, I've probably sent thousands of resumes in my life that like get sent back within minutes because of that, probably that college thing,
No,
right?
but even in that 2000 to 2010, like you could have gotten a job in tech without the degree there, because there was so much, not a lot of
Hmm.
people had degrees yet.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like you could go and just say, I need college, because there just wasn't a lot of it yet. Now there's a lot of it. So I could cherry pick that off, right? You were kind of in a good place at the right time for not needing the college education. But how long were you with that company in
Like
Tony?
probably like 2 years. I moved to New York with my then girlfriend, now my wife. She went to criminal justice graduate school, and I worked there a little bit for the vitamin shop
In New York.
in New York.
So
Yeah, they had
so you left a
I
tech job in Texas to go to
yeah,
New York to
yeah,
follow your girlfriend who was going to go to school in New York.
yeah, and I was ready to get out of Texas too, and it was New York, and so I got there and I kind of floated around. I went to audio school because I was in audio, as I mentioned, and it was just like it's funny because I went to audio school. When I say I skipped college, I did go to like half a semester of classes at Columbia College in Chicago for audio school. And it was the last semester they were working on tape machines and they were going to get computers the next semester. And like, I just paid for Pro Tools and I don't get to use it. And so I dropped out, like I was just like, I'll just take that $3,000 and buy a good music computer. And that was like part of my gap year insolence.
So you're in New York now. You're kind of working retail
No, not retail. I worked for corporate vitamin shop in their call
with
center.
the corporate in the call center. Okay, okay. So
Hmm.
you're
And
handling like tech support.
I'm handling tech support. I'm doing vitamin orders. I had regular customers. I was there like a couple months and I got bumped up to handling like health escalation. So like we had a doctor on staff. So someone said they got a rash or whatever. I would get them and document it and stuff so they'd cover their butts. Um, and so, yeah. And so I did that. And then I went to back in the tech for my next job.
While you're still in New York, so she's finishing. What is she there? She's gonna have to be there for 2 years.
It was supposed to be like a 4-year program, and so yeah, so we're there. We didn't have any plans. We were just there. I ended up staying in New York about 8 years, all told.
With how many companies at that point? Because now you're
Um,
talking like between 2000 and 2008, you're in New York.
yeah, yeah. So I was there until like 2010, and in 2006 I started working for a company called Pando, and Pando was my first startup experience. To completely date where I was with the technology, it was a way to send large email attachments greater than 50 megs using peer-to-peer technology.
From email clients.
They had an Outlook plugin and they had like a desktop app, and it was like, wow, I can send a 50 meg attachment.
And people
And
would pay for that plugin to be able to do that.
well, no, and then the market crashed, and we pivoted to being a content delivery network, and we launched with a little game called League of Legends. That was a brand new game, and it
I
blew
mean,
up.
I'm not a gamer, but it sounds, yeah, I've heard of
Yeah,
that.
and it blew up, and so we were acquired by Microsoft, and so every time you run Windows Update, that's Pando Tech.
Wow. So
Um,
did you transition to be a Microsoft employee at that point?
no, Microsoft did not want me, and so we spun off the gaming business into another company, and we did that for a little bit, and that was kind of like swirling around, and then I got into conversational AI with a company called BotKit, and
Well,
BotKit
what year
was
is that?
that is 2016. So I was with Pando from '06 to like 10. And then I was kind of like just like vibing at the game company. I started out doing support and I was employee number 5. And we went up to 30. And then 2008 happened and we went back down to 5. And I became the product manager. And because I was the product manager and we had a portfolio of customers, for continuity purposes, I went to this new entity in the game company. And I was just kind of like, it was interesting because I was just answering customer emails and getting on calls with escalations on my own, but not talking to any of the people in the company for a year and a half, 2 years. So it was like, it was very much like, as long as the checks keep coming, I'll keep answering the emails. And that's when I started getting into like working remotely and tools like Slack and stuff were really interesting to me because I was an IRC guy and a Usenet guy and, talking to people on ICQ and all that stuff for years. And so it felt like a natural transition.
And but though that 8 years from 2008 to 2016. You're still in New York, or
Yeah.
okay?
Like 2008 to like 2011. Uh, Me and my wife were in, and we got married, and then we moved to Texas, back to Austin, to like get away from the hustle and bustle, and do the family thing. And that's when I kind of met the folks at Howdy who had been doing BotKit for a while, and they were a Slack fund company. So Slack became a venture arm very early on, and they decided they wanted to have an API. So we launched as a day one supporter of the Slack API. So we were the only way to make chatbots at Slack when that feature launched.
So I'm interested because 2016 is super early.
Mm-hmm.
I know AI's had these sort of every decade or every 15 years
Yeah.
has a little bit of a resurgence, but the technology is just not there and it sort of dies down.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're here to stay now.
Mm-hmm.
But like, what is the face of AI in 2016? Because it's not what
We
we
had
have
the number
today.
one we had the number one chatbot in the App Store for a long time because there wasn't much to do, and we used regex. So that was the state of AI in 2016, right? It
You
was
basically had a database of response answers
yeah.
and
And
used
so
Regex to parse it.
you would design it in like a circus barker kind of way to like make sure that people don't ask dumb questions. And if they ask dumb questions, then you gracefully get back on track. And so conversational design was definitely like a thing of smoke and mirrors then, right? Like you were just like, like that Kramer episode of Seinfeld where they use movie phone. That is conversational AI, like, why don't you just tell me your movie? Like,
Yeah.
and that's kind of like what the technology was. I think of like probably like 2000 to 2016, 17. And that's when you start getting into like AI handling inference and, you know, just as a intent recognition. And it wasn't really until like 2000 where you had a serious ability to like make plans of tooling. Like for a long time, it went from like, okay, regex sucks. Let's use AI pattern matching to better match things and fill in slots and stuff. And then it became like, oh, we can orchestrate a plan and go to different systems and arbitrate things that only people could do before. And so that's like the LLM revolution was you can do that. Like, you go from a 30% quality way to like 69% quality. And
But
that's where
you
we've
wouldn't
been stuck for like 5
but you
years.
wouldn't say in 2016, 17 you had like you were passing a Turing test at that point.
They would, and they did. And
They
that,
did.
that's why these things die, because they've been claiming what ChatGPT's been claiming since 2000. And people get to the end of the pitch and they take it home and they open it up and it doesn't do that. It's like, oh, there's just regex in here. There's no AI in here at all. And that's what's killed the AI industry last couple bubbles, right? Is because instead of just saying we're gonna make it easier for people to say what they want into a microphone, and so now they don't have to press 1, 2, 3, or 9 to get to the phone tree. Now it's like, oh no, it can learn and it's smart and it's your best friend and it'll replace your wife and whatever the problems. Like, I worked for Walmart after BotKit was acquired, also by Microsoft, and I worked for Walmart for a very little bit. And the first day I met the head of the contact center. Walmart has like 19 contact centers because they're huge, and this was the HR contact center. It's like, I want a 100% AI automated contact center by July of 2016. So like same thing they're selling today, right? Like the same, like what Sam Altman's. And he's like, how feasible can that be? I'm like, and he didn't say the year. He said by July. I'm like, July of what year? Right? Was my response, because it's such a loaded question, right? Like, is the purpose of the contact center to keep people from talking to people or getting people answers? Or, what is your goal in the contact center? And they don't measure it. They know they have to pay $200 people a salary every week, and that's the only definite thing they know. They
You
know
know,
calls spike on W2 time.
in 98, from 98 to 2004, I was building call center solutions,
Okay, good. So you know what I'm talking
inbound
about.
and outbound stuff, right? Like
Yeah.
our biggest problem in the beginning was making sure the screen popped before the phone rang, right? You had to do that. And actually voicemail detection, where if you're doing an outbound dialing campaign, you don't want to leave voice message, right? You need to know as soon as possible that you're not talking to a human being. I guess all of that is sort of AI. We even built IVR systems, right? Which I still to this day hate beyond any belief. Dial
Hmm.
one, dial, like I hate all that stuff. I just want to talk to somebody. But I don't think AI solves that problem. I don't want to talk to an AI. I guess if you're going to pass the Turing test, and I don't know, maybe you get lucky, but I don't know. I was in this space for I don't know how many years that is, 6 years.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and so I was in this space. I worked for a company after Walmart called LivePerson, which you're probably familiar with. They are, and I was at that place when COVID hit. And that was the place to be in 2000 because every contact center in the world was closed for 90 days, right? Because any contact center that wasn't distributed or didn't have a system for people to work from home
Yeah.
was shut down. And so people like the industry, all those regex things, like that's when they fully died, right? Because it was just like, okay, we're going to throw out all this legacy stuff we have, and now we have to be AI first because we're drowning. They would have call volume. They have like two people picking up the phone for a call queue of thousands of people, right? And so like you structurally need help, like you're drowning. And I think that is kind of like, all technology things have boom or bust cycles. And so either like the cycles are informed by opportunity of new technologies or driven by scarcity or austerity or social disease and things happen in a hurry. And so I think the thing with the AI bubble or no bubble story right now is like for a long time it was a solution in search of a problem up until ChatGPT came out. And ChatGPT looked like it was like lead from gold. And actually, it was just a plateau to another peak, right? And so now you see the other peak, and we're figuring out what the other peak is. And so you're seeing these models trying to adapt and becoming money making ventures and revenue things. And but people forget like regex still works. Regex is basically free now with the price of compute. So why not put like a defensive regex layer at the top before the LLM and capture 10% of the calls before they go to LLM? And like
But
once people,
in all these
okay,
companies that you're doing, are you managing the call center? Are you working on that call center tech?
um,
What was your role in all of this?
a lot of it was talking to customers and fixing implementations and designing implementations. So a lot of the times I was like, okay, uh, you can build whatever you want as long as it's red and yellow and does this, right? And so like white labeling and things like that. So I was the person who came in and explained to people that the sales guy was lying half the time they were talking to me before the contract was sold.
For the call center solution, you were
Yeah, yeah,
selling
yeah,
calls. Yeah,
yeah,
so
yeah.
you
So
were in that same space I was in.
yeah, like ISV kind of like person thing, and so like I understood like I built the system like BotKit eventually became like we had 200,000 customers from every vertical in every industry, so we understood you know call centers and the Grammys and the DNC and the RNC were our customers and like so
Yeah.
it gives you kind of that perspective like, oh, it's just internet's just a filing system, and sometimes it's a person, sometimes it's a computer that picks up. And so just like having that as like a disambiguator is really helpful for when you automate these things, because then you're like, oh, I don't need to build 17 micro solutions when all the things I need are in step 1 and step 8. So I'll just hop it with AI or automation or Python script or whatever.
And but you still had to use some telco. You had to use PBXs and all that. I mean, were part of your solution.
I it was I it was kind of like right around the rise of Twilio that I really got heavily into space, and stuff over
Sibling
IP
was
was
the
like,
one. Yeah.
so people were just like, yeah, we're just gonna rebuild the new thing in VoIP only, right? And then we'll put like a SIP at the end or kind of a gestion point at the end, and that was like another thing. It's like everything just became another SaaS service at that point, right? And if it's just like REST calls. Doesn't matter if it's a phone or a computer typing or a video feed. It's all just bits on the wire.
So up to this point, I'm understanding two things. One, if you want to be acquired by Microsoft, hire Peter Swimm. And then two, you've got essentially at this point, say you got about 22 years of call center experience in some
Mm,
form or another.
yeah.
So what happens now near the end? Because It's 2025. You're doing more call center stuff in 20, right? COVID's going to end at the end of next year, 21. What's happening now? When do you start
So,
Toilville? Where do you even come
so,
up with that name? 'Cause it's an
well,
interesting
okay.
name.
Well, Toyville is kind of like was my punk label in my 20s, and so like I'm keeping it up because I think it's still applicable because I think of things as like I don't like doing performative work, and there's certain things I feel that are performative work like burn downs and you know all these things you do to make like a spreadsheet for one group and a a dashboard view for another group, and it's all just like I did my work. And I think that's kind of like what I was bad at school was like I'd be staring off out the window, and a teacher who didn't like me would call on me, hoping to catch me at daydreaming, and I have the answer for them, right? Because their lecture was boring, and I read it the night before, and I didn't hear the lecture again. And they would either a teacher would appreciate that I didn't wreck the flow of their class, and I just minded my business, or they had it out for me because I was like some Bart Simpsoning kind of like trickster who was like undermining their authority or whatever. And I think work is like that too, right? Where there's some managers who are like, he goes off to the corner and it looks like he's playing solitaire all day and he delivers his reports on time. So I don't really care how his process works. And then there's ones that's like, he's not doing the ticket updates, or whatever. And so like I'm at LivePerson, and my former team that was acquired, the technology stack was hired into Microsoft, and they were on something called the bot framework. And there's an opening, and I jumped over there just in time for a series of reorgs that landed me in Copilot Studio, which was the IDE for Microsoft Copilot.
So you ended up working for Microsoft?
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
You did. So it was your destiny to go work at Microsoft.
I have Bill Gates' signature on 4 decades of jobs. 90s, 10,000s, 11s. So you could say I was acquired twice, but also like I lost 4 jobs to Bill Gates too. So it's like glass half empty, half full kind of thing.
That's wild, dude. You're just life intertwined around this company's.
I know.
Company just, wow. So you ended up on the Copilot team. I thought GitHub was working on all the Copilot stuff.
So this is a very uninteresting story unless you're into like Game of Thrones boardroom stuff. I was on a team called Microsoft Bot Framework. Microsoft Bot Framework started out as a research project in Microsoft Research that was productized into the Azure group, and then it was then acqui-hired back into the Power Platform group, which is kind of like the closest thing Microsoft has to Salesforce. And then when so we were using business tools under the name of Power Virtual Agents, and Power Virtual Agents was basically like BotKit, and we were working on like making it better and upgrading it and experimenting with LLMs like ChatGPT 2.5. When ChatGPT 3 came out, we were the only people in the entire company ready. Oh yeah, we had day one access to ChatGPT when it launched because we already built all the stuff to do it. And so we became kind of like the Visual Code Studio of Copilot really quickly because all you had to do was change the name of the product and the URL, and it was plausible. But at that time, there was 109 chatbot products called Copilot at Microsoft as of June 2022. And they all ran different orchestrators, and they all ran different models. And then they hired Suleiman, who unified the streams, and they're still working on that today, but it was a very, very balkanized world for a very long time.
What part of that were you working on?
I was working in the bot framework. So the bot framework was the only way to really do Teams integrations, but then Teams started making their own SDK, so they forked. And then the bot framework was kind of like your pro code way of making chatbots, and it was agnostic to things like Slack and Teams. And so the Teams people wanted more attention, so they made their own. And then Power Virtual Agent people were entirely focused on it's called the Power Platform, which is really enterprise users. So we kind of jumped around. Now, basically everything that you do with the word Copilot in it is using this team work, because Microsoft figures like, why is 80% of our competitors our own employees, in terms of stacks. So like there's almost now a singular no code stack and then a low code stack, and then pro coding stack. There's like 3 of them still. So it went down from like 20 stacks to like 4 or 5.
Because I got friends at GitHub that are working on the Copilot
Yeah.
stuff now.
So
the tab completion and the other stuff.
Copilot as a name started at GitHub even before they were acquired, right? So that is a separate stream. And so I would keep an eye on that, because as of August, whatever, with GitHub being part of Microsoft mothership in a way they weren't before, they will probably unify. The understanding of the company was that GitHub Copilot was the most sophisticated AI agent platform by far, but also like it was like a designed to be a SaaS thing, right? Like there was no way to decouple it from GitHub, the entity. And that's why you have Azure AI, which is like designed to be kind of like what ChatGPT wants to be someday kind of thing, where it's just like, here's where you can play with different models and put it into your code so you can play with models fluidly without changing your code kind of thing. And so Microsoft almost has a unified stack. It'd be great to see what the CTO has in the future of making that more coherent, because I think a lot of the things I did at Microsoft was explaining to customers, like the sales guy was technically right when he said you could do anything you want at Microsoft, but anything you want may require 19 microservices spread across the company, and their interoperability is staggered based on the alignment of the org chart, which is like not a strong sales pitch, right? Like you say, well, these 2 teams hate each other's guts, so they won't do anything to fix it, right? They won't do anything to like mitigate it, and the work is entirely on you to manage like an Azure function to bridge, and if that falls over, your entire platform fails, kind of stuff. And so
what I find interesting is my first experience with any of this stuff was with Copilot, right? And it always left a bad, like for a good year, I was just like, I don't understand this stuff. Like, I don't feel like it's doing what it's supposed to. And the moment I got off of Copilot and switched over to, I saw Cursor and now the Source Graph AMP, I was like, oh, this is really the way it's supposed to behave, isn't it? Like for a company that was there first and had access to the best models through OpenAI first, I always felt like the experience wasn't where it should have been compared to what a lot of other people are doing.
And I think the reason is because it was a bolt-on and not a fundamental building block. And so like when we say something hallucinates, it's because it made a guess based on available data that doesn't align with what I expect it to do. And so when you say Cursor works better, I think it's because it's juggling less conceptual weight in its prompting than a Microsoft Graph API call gives it. And I've been in organizations that if you set up your organization with everything that Microsoft recommends for like good AI, and that's stuff like Purview and delegated auth and protections and labeling, data labeling, it works good. Like, I've ever seen an organization that conforms to that level of quality and standards? No, right? Because it's like when you hook up Copilot to your SharePoints, there's like SharePoints in there from the 90s and the 2000s of like old bad data that no one knows who it belongs to and no one knows who owns the channel. And if you look at like the Copilot best practices, you realize this is like a company that doesn't exist, right? Because they want every bit of information to have a librarian and to keep it clean and safe, because Copilot will fall over very easily if you have any kind of dirty data in there. And so like when you're talking about dev tools like Client and stuff, they work really well because they have just one job and they have one system prompt memory, and they don't have to keep the entire org chart and everyone's OneDrive's indexing in its brain and every turn to decide stuff.
So like they're failing on their success.
Well, I talked a lot to the Azure AI guy. We would just have coffee chats off Teams calls, so it wasn't recorded. And we're like, well, at the end of the day, we're really just selling expensive inference without this like knowledge hygiene stuff, right? And I think that's kind of the problem. It's hard to like, no one sits on where everything intersects. Like, if you wanted to handle the knowledge hygiene problem, you have to go through the Purview team, the Entra team, the OneDrive team, the SharePoint team, the Teams team. Like, you're already dealing in organizations in the hundreds of people, and you have to get them to change their roadmap to like go to a different line. And the only guidance really Microsoft did internally at first was like, you got to do Copilot branding, and you got to find a way to get Sydney, which is Chat GPT 3.5 orchestration in your product, even if your product had no chat interface.
And didn't need it. Find a way to
Right.
put it in there.
And that's why Notepad has Copilot, right? It's just like, who needs Copilot in Notepad, right? And it's because they need to stay relevant, so they didn't get downsized, but they got downsized anyways.
So how long you at Microsoft then? Because
3.5 years.
so you left in like 23?
I left in November of last year, so it's been about a year
Last year,
since I left. Yeah.
So what was the decision? Like, this is now, I'm gonna look, I've got all this call center experience. I've got AI experience starting in 2016, really. And now I've just sort of opened up Pandora's box, being at Microsoft for 3 years. And your decision is to start your own company?
Yeah. Well, like, I think the number one thing was like, I became kind of the ghost whisperer because I was the only PM on my team that answered Teams calls. Like, because people were told to use Copilot Studio and no one at Copilot Studio picked up the phone to tell them how to use Copilot Studio. And so even though it wasn't my purview, it wasn't my job, and like I would go to office hours and answer questions, and I would help the sales field define SOWs and stuff like that, just because it really helped me as a product manager to understand use cases when I was building my project. And I thought that was really important to like find novel use cases and see the Venn diagram and then solve for that overlap cheaply versus making a custom solution on the problem of the month. And people would always say to me, it's like, man, I wish you could just come and stay with us for a week and do hackathons. It's like, well, I could, couldn't I? How much would that cost? And I looked at how much it would cost. I'm like, that's good money. I'm a person who could do this. And that's kind of when I started. I felt like it's hard enough to make big product changes in a huge org, but it's easy to make like product decisions in implementation. And so like, even though the product is what it is and you go to market with what you have, being able to like make a local decision as a group to overcome that is a lot more fulfilling, I think, than to like.
So you had clients that wanted you, like, because of the role you had talking to customers, you knew where their pain points were. You knew you could solve those problems. And you knew that because one of the biggest things when starting a business is finding that first client, finding that second client. But I feel like you had a handful of clients there that you felt pretty comfortable would pay you the dollars too.
Yeah. No, I'm making about the same amount of money as I did in big tech. And also, I've never done an outbound sales call. Like, I don't have to do that LinkedIn hustle, and I'm getting just enough work to get by. And it gives me time to play with everything as opposed to being focused on one thing and getting myopic about one stack. And so, like, also my headspace is better. Like, if you look at my Apple Health, my heart rate has kind of lowered down. And I think that is just kind of like, it was a good choice for me at this stage of my life to like take that from me. So.
Yeah. And with the experience that you have, you basically walk in and before they even say a word, you're like, okay, this is what you're going to tell me, right? Da 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 da. Yeah. Of course. All right. Do you have people working for you or you're?
Yeah. I have contractors, and they're all people I've known in my personal life for 15, 20 years. And so like, instead of like paying tech people I don't know tech people prices, I give better than they know prices to people who are teachers and like PMOs and stuff to do tech work. And because we're an AI first company, I can help them more. Like there's like the thing in startups where like you are afraid to delegate sensitive things, but because we have an AI safety net, I could trust people to do stuff on their own. And when it comes to being reviewed, then it's closer than ever before to like what I would do on myself, because it's only 24 hours in a day. And so I find myself like, I was really staunchly against AI assisted work, like writing essays for you and stuff. But now that I see like, okay, if I use a local model and I point it only at documents that I've written for the past 20 years, it kind of writes in my voice in the first draft in a way that like saves me like 2 hours of time. And it's my writing, it's my voice, it's my style. And when it's not, I use Chicago style manual attribution like I was taught in high school, and it's not hard. So I think like when people are talking about AI slop, it's like, well, if we taught kids how to properly citate sucks, and how long do you go before it's plagiarism and not? And like, this is all just like humanities work. And like, if people are kind of like unaware of them, it's because austerity has cut the budget for English classes. It's not like,
But you have the I don't want to use the word luxury. I don't want to use the word.
no, 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 no,
You
absolutely.
have no, not even that. You have enough of your voice in written content
Mm,
to make that. I do. I have a lot of my voice in written content. I have it in video. I've already written a bunch of code to extract video and code, right, and all that off of video. We're both lucky in that there's enough content of our voice to pull that off. But there aren't people out there that have their voice, enough of their voice, in a place where you could say rag it into an LLM and sort of get that back. So, like when you talk about I have AI safeguards, I guess one of them is you have your voice sort of stored in some form or another that lets you validate that anything that's produced, for the most part, is going to sound like me.
hmm Well,
Yeah.
I mean, like, yeah, like you hear all the time about lawyers who go into court citing case law that doesn't exist, right? And is that AI's fault or is that a lawyer's fault for not reading what the machine printed? Like they wouldn't trust a paralegal to write something without checking it, right? So why would they trust AI to do it? And so I think like AI slop is less of a problem of AI quality and more of a problem of curation, like more of the person who presented it. And if you are a person who publishes slop like Mark Zuckerberg does with Meta every day or whatever, then I cancel my account. There's no reason for me to be on a slop provider. So like now we're talking governance extends all the way to the edge of your life where it's like, I'm just not going to let that garbage in into my house. And only then, and only when you're able to give provenance everything that leaves your house, then you are truly like AI safe, right? Unless you can like prove that like every single thing was written by a person artisanally, then everything you do is suspect. You're like, I had a friend in the music community and he put out a bunch of EPs in a short amount of time, and there was like a witch hunt against him that was he used AI, right? Because he uses very processed sampling and electronic music, and it's like, yeah, it's very overproduced, but is it AI or not? And it doesn't matter, right? Because the question is whether or not what he used to do it, but is it good or not? I've never seen anything that proudly claims its AI is good. It doesn't mean I'm not seeing good AI. Maybe people are keeping it secret or whatever. But the proof they're using against them was this tool used to like gamify Spotify playlists, and they ran it through and it says, this is AI. I'm like, well, that's AI too. Use AI to prove AI. And so it's all just like black boxes pointing fingers at black boxes in that Spider-Man meme. And so we need to kind of reframe the whole system. We need to have some sort of like nutrition label on content, and we need to have in a way that's just like not respectful to the process of creation. Like a person shouldn't have to justify, I only use Photoshop or I only used PowerPoint to do a thing. It comes down to what they put out. So.
But I find that interesting because my friend is the one who started Splice, which was basically a site for musicians to gain, money on samples that are in music all over, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, are you going to now say that any song, which just about for a long time, almost everything was pulling off a splice at some point, was that no longer valid either because the musician didn't do every single note like, I just find that interesting.
I mean, the minute the invention of the printing press, I think sampling became possible, right? Where it became the act of making an image or a copy of something was wholly different from the thing that it represents, right? And so, if you go back to the 2020s, I mean the 1920s, with collage becoming because printing became cheap enough, photography became cheap enough, people would do mixed media collage. That's sampling. If you go to like, when you had multi-track recording in the 50s, people would play a recording of like classical music or something over a thing, and like Spike Jones and sound effects and radio, that's kind of like collage. That's like replaying fragments of other media. And so like there's a long history of like sampling and influence, and like when the Marvin Gaye estate sued the British singer whose name escapes me, because he used the same chord progression, and he's in court and he's just like, well, here's the 30 songs that came out the year before him that uses this chord progression, and here's the 30 songs in the 20 decades since. And it's just like, okay, there's certain things in copyright that are broken, right? And sampling is, when it's transformative, can be as emotionally resonant as the original work. You know, you look at hip hop and, you know, everything that came out since. I think the question is the extraction a commentary on art in a fair use way, or is it a colonial extraction of content from one group to another? You know, when we talk about AI slop, I think we're talking about like fumes coming out of factory of IP. You know, it's like you put all the brain work in the thing and you have your machine just like generate Xeroxes on an assembly line. And it's like not emotionally resonant, and it's not like a commentary, and it exists wholly to be content and published. And so
the funny thing is, when that developer produced that 5,000 lines of code in a half an hour, my first question was, I wonder whose code you stole. That was the first thing in my head, right? Like, I wonder whose code you stole, and we'll never know.
I mean, what's the difference between best practice and original thought? Like, I hung out a lot in my teens with guys in the demo scene, and there's these guys who would like crack software. Like, you would get cracked Photoshop, and before you run it, there's like this cool little graphics thing that runs in the executable saying, this was cracked by Razor, blah, blah, blah. And they spent, like, all those guys now are huge fancy CTOs because they spent so much time breaking copyright that they know how systems work, and they know how to do things with, like, okay, I squeeze an entire like music video into 14K of memory on this floppy disk. And like, so like, are you to say that all those people's work, you know, they're pirates and now they're privateers, right? And so when you say someone steals code versus, like, if your linter normalizes code into a house style of code, are you stealing code? You know, like, no, you're normalizing code to work in a way. And so then instead of engineers treating their work as art, they should treat their work like being surgeons, you know? So you have a job to do. You have to take a tumor out of a brain, and there's a way to do it, and you do lines of code and math to do it. And if you could be creative in that and that gives you a thrill, obviously do it. But like, really, your job there is for elegance and simplicity and repeatability and performance, right? And so I think those are the metrics. You know, to me, if someone submitted 5,000 lines of functional code, I'd be like, well, how much of this can I cut before it fails? You know, because I am thinking like Windows 3.1, where it's like, I want to run it on a floppy. Like, my entire AI governance system is 50 megs. A Docker Compose in 50 megs, and any machine connected to the internet will give you my infrastructure on a new machine. That's cool. That's like, I think that's the promise of AI, where not only that, but it comes with an analytics system. So the first time you use AI, it's 100% AI usage. And the next time you say the exact same prompt, it's maybe 90% AI usage. And in a month, it's zero. Like, we're using AI to train the code to a point where AI is no longer part of the runtime. Because that should be the end goal, is like code that can run on my bicycle, code that can run like 50 miles away from the nearest cell phone line, right? Because I think we're so cloud dependent and cloud heavy. Like, AWS going down will destroy half the internet for a couple hours. Like, that's not a good system. That's not what the internet was designed for, right? It was designed to be resilient and multi-node and, you know, recoverable. And now, you know, if Microsoft Azure has a bad day and Google Cloud has a bad day, the internet will be down.
So let me ask you, we're close to being out of time, and I'm kind of curious, as it relates to Toilville, like, what's your niche? What are your favorite projects? What's your niche? Why should people consider you?
My favorite projects are I was working with an insurance broker in Texas, and they're a 5-people company, and he quit being an insurance broker for the big guys because he liked doing all the things he liked and hated doing all the things he didn't like. So he, like me, decided to make a company that only did that. And what he doesn't like today is people come to a website, they fill out a form, they get an email, they copy the form into the CMS program, they take notes, they come to the meeting, they listen to the person, they take the notes, and they sent it out to all the underwriters to get a quote. And like, all that stuff is just like meat in the assembly line process. And what really gets his rocks off, and I think what makes him better than the big guy, is he'll spend as much time as possible on that call getting to know his clients so he understands all the facets of the problem. So the AI automation there isn't replacing him, it's replacing copying and pasting from email to CMS to meeting bookings to planning your calendar and your day. And so instead of like spending 2 hours a day on that, 2 hours talking to people, you spend 30 minutes on that and you talk to 2 extra clients a day and you get 2 extra revenue streams coming in. And I think those are like the ideal situations. Like this should generate not only 0 layoffs in your company when done, you should have budget and headroom and time to onboard more employees and have more revenue streams.
Yeah. So you like projects that free up entrepreneurs and people to be able to do more with their time.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so
Or like, you have a person who's a junior who's kicking butt and you give them 2 hours a day so they can go to boot camp and become a senior, and so now you have a senior working for you and that you trust and knows your system and all that. Like, I think those are like the really powerful outcomes of like time saved and the ROI of AI that absolutely no one's selling. Like, at the end of the day, like Amazon wants to lay off 15,000 people. They're going to lay off 15,000 people, irregardless of their ability to adapt to an AI world. And, the little guys of the world, they're just kind of like, they need to understand like when they're the product or they're the customer. And that's the other part of my business. It's really kind of like, you need to be completely nimble and agnostic. And, Microsoft has 18-month head start on everyone, but you should have like jumped off, as soon as product X did what you wanted because it's 2x cheaper. You should be free to do so and make those decisions and not have to be a huge migration story and all that.
nice. All right, Peter, we are out of time. So we'll add this to the show notes. This was cool. It was a great conversation. I appreciate it. We'll add this to the show notes, but if anybody wants to reach out and talk to you, maybe they have questions about the show, maybe they're interested in your services, what's the best way to reach out?
Probably the best way is to visit our website. We have a vanity URL, peoplemakeitbetter.com.
Peoplemakeitbetter.com. Oh, that's pretty cool. That's easy to remember. Yeah, that's pretty good. All right. Thanks, Peter. Again, I really appreciate the storyline and I love talking to entrepreneurs. And you kind of started this a little bit late, right? Like you did 25, almost 30, about 22 years of working for others, and finally said, now I know what I want to do as an entrepreneur. And you've been doing it now for what, a year and a half?
Yeah, about a year and a half. And, I think I was in the mindset for a long time and it was just kind of like getting kicked out of the boat to start swimming kind of thing, you have to have the courage to make the plunge. And I think that's the other thing I talk to younger people is like, it's a lot easier to make that plunge when you're younger and you should be naive and do it versus trying to figure out if you should do it for the first time in your 40s.
So then looking back on it now, do you feel like you should have done this earlier or you did it at the right time?
Every 5 years of my adult life, there's been a huge economic and or world crisis. So like, I can't blame my trajectory, we went from war to bubble to war to bubble to disease to bubble. And, I think at the end of the day, you got to put your mask on first before you can help the people beside you. You have to take care of your family and your friends and all that first. So like, there's no time too late to start. Like my career heroes are like a Tom Waits or someone who didn't have a hit record till they're like 50 or 40. It's just like, it's more about the process and the brain and the timing and the execution. And it's all kind of like luck. So there's no like too late to start moment.
Nice. All right. This is Peter Swimm and Bill Kennedy signing off from the Ardan Labs Podcast. We hope to hear from everybody again real soon.